Hi, Alice, all the way from the UK. How are you?
All the way from the UK here at our global headquarters in Soho in London.
Great to have you here. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being here and having a chat with us on Diageo's experience with AI. Before we really deep dive into, well, let's say AI within Diageo's, since it is a case study, I would be happy to hear more from you. What's your role and actually what Diageo actually is? Because I can't imagine that, well, people do not know fully what Diageo actually is.
Are you going to be coy and pretend you've never sampled any of our brands, Jeroen?
No, I can't. At least personally, I can't. No, I have to be honest about that. Yeah.
There we go. So if I start with Diageo, as I say, we are the major international spirits manufacturer and brands. So we own some of the most famous brands around the world. So I get the joy of working with brands like Johnny Walker, Smirnoff, Bailey's, Guinness, you name it, across a huge range of categories. And I always say I've got the best job in the business. I always say that, and I maintain it because, as you hinted at in your introduction, I get the pleasure of working with every brand, every market, and every function in our business to pick up a lot of those projects or areas that really solve consumer and shopper problems online that might normally fall between the gaps between functions. So my job is to bring together those sometimes quite disparate functions in aid of the shopper's experience. And I think I might have mentioned to you, of course, we're selling things like whiskies that often are very normal for them to be 20, 40 years old. The world in which they were made is a fundamentally different world into the one they're now being sold in. And so trying to optimize for that gap to bring a real kind of heritage and craft product, but make it accessible and give people brilliant experiences in the way that they want to shop today.
Yeah, great to hear. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later on in how to use AI actually also to tell this particular story as well. But first, you are global head of digital transformation, and we're talking about AI as well today. Do you consider AI as one of the biggest driver of this digital transformation, or is your scope broader than that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing to say is that Diageo as a business and our digital transformation team within that always starts with the consumer and the shopper first and what they need. And so it might not be the driver of transformation necessarily. That is the shopper need and what the healthy tension is there. Absolutely, it is a huge part of our capability in solving for those challenges. And that does go across every area of the business. Absolutely.
Yeah. We also would like to focus specifically on content creation and testing. That's where AI comes in, I assume, pretty well. Can you take us a little bit on your journey of the integration journey, so to speak, of AI into your approach when it comes to content creation and testing?
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, it has revolutionized pretty much every element along our path from conception to creation, production, testing, etc., of content. And perhaps one of the more obvious ways is that it significantly can cut down on timings there, right? So I think it's fairly straightforward to imagine that it can cut down on creation time. But even when it comes to something like testing, actually, historically, even with agile testing methods, that would have taken us around 2 weeks to get results. And we, realistically, that's probably either you've then got to go and recruit a shopper panel to be able to show them all of these things, or you have to persuade a retailer to take these things and to put it out into a public domain in order to get the results. Whereas actually with these AI testing tools, we can get results in as little as 2 hours. So you're almost starting to test in real time. And we can do that in simulated environments, which is really important as well. So we can be a bit more experimental. But I suppose if I talk to the time cutting, maybe that's a really obvious way to look at it. I prefer to look at the flip side of that, which is actually that this allows us to do so much more, right? So this isn't about stopping things. This is actually around taking out a lot of the more sort of grunt work is how I can only best describe it. I hope that translates well around the world, the sort of very manual parts behind it, to allow us to do more. You can imagine that ultimately our brands are driven by shopper and consumer events in their lives. Yes, the big events that we might all know about, like Christmas, but those micro moments as well, those birthdays that people want to celebrate. And we have a really exciting opportunity with some of these tools to do more. So, hopefully it was, if I take an example, because it was Eurovision at the weekend, you might have seen a whole load more Bailey's content as we're a major sponsor of that program, whereas traditionally that might have been limited more to Christmas. It means that every sporting event we can do with Guinness, for example, but also we can get into those micro moments, as I say, with birthdays and very personal things as well. So it's about actually unleashing our creatives to do more with the stuff that they're really good at.
Yeah, but then the question, at least that pops up in my mind, is then when you can do more, you have lots of more information, because the time you have new information is, well, brought down to, let's say, 2 hours or 2 minutes even. You also have to make sure that you can handle this as well, with within your organization, with your team, with your marketing team, how to deal with all those results that are coming up. How have you at Diageo's made that switch? And because it's more an transformation organizationally as well, I guess.